Yo, 1 2 1 2. We are live on Beatppl podcast, episode 73. We got the usual suspects in here, but we also have a special guest. We're interviewing and talking with the Moogstress, Michelle Moog-Koussa. We're going to be discussing the Bob Moog Foundation, the Moogseum, the Electronic Voyager documentary, and the Moog Legacy, and probably a ton of other stuff. And we're happy to have her here. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hello.
Yo.
Hey.
So, welcome to the show, Michelle.
Well, thanks. It's an honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. We got everybody in the house. Travarsi, what's going on, Travarsi?
Hey.
And
everyone.
we got D Still.
Here.
And we got Upright. And I am B-Boy Tech, also known as Corey. And so, Michelle, it's cool to have you here because, you know, we see you around NAMM time. And actually, last time I saw you at NAMM, I stopped you and I just told you, I just kind of felt the need to tell you how influential, which I already know that your father is, and I found myself chasing a certain synth sound when I got into synths, because in my ignorance, I kind of thought synth is a synth is a synth, and you can make any sound with any synth because it's a synth. and it took me years to find out that the sound that I was really chasing from, Stevie Wonder records and all that other stuff that I grew up on, and even the Isley Brothers and just about everything that I grew up on, the sound that I was chasing was a Moog sound. Then later, one of my favorite producers, Jay Dilla, and his Voyager sound, and I found chasing that. When I got a Moog, I was like, oh, there it is. So when I saw you at NAMM, I was just kind of like, yo, I need to tell her just how special or how important her father is to me, as if you didn't know already that how important he is, because you built the Moog Foundation and the Moogsem. And how often do you get people to come up to you and kind of a little in awe of your father and just feel the need to gush at you like that?
Well, at NAMM, I get it a lot. And, when I'm out and about and, I meet new people, sometimes I get it then too. But I have to tell you that every time is kind of like the first time I'm hearing it, because every kind of testimonial about how Bob Moog has affected somebody's life is like a brand new experience. And it's so heartfelt and kind of profound that I always kind of just, it stops me, kind of intellectually. And it almost takes me back the same way every single time. Just because it is so powerful. So I'd never be afraid to come up and tell me how impactful that legacy has been on your life and your music, because it's a really beautiful, I think, sacred thing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Real quick, I've had this burning question within me since when I knew you were doing this. I just wanted to ask you, what was it like growing up around a man just like in the lab making these crazy concoctions? I'd love to hear your perspective on that, growing up. What was that like, and how that impacted your life today?
Well, I think it's not what a lot of people think, because my father kept his career at arm's length from the family. And I was born in 1968. So at that point, he had a workshop outside the house. Then in 1970, 71, we moved. I was only 3. He had a little workshop inside the house, but didn't do too much synthesis work there because he was at Moog Music most of the time. And then a little bit later, he had a workshop behind our house. And then when I was when I was 10, we moved down here to North Carolina. We were here till I was 17. He also had his workshop just across the driveway. And that's all kind of a symbolism for how much he kept his career separate from the family.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that I like to say that I didn't really meet Bob Moog until I was 37 years old, and he passed away.
Oh,
I mean, I knew my dad, but I did not really know Bob Moog. I had like these few glimmers into my dad was Bob Moog during my life, but for the most part, he was very set on keeping it pretty separate. I remember when I was about 5 years old, he was on To Tell the Truth. And some of you might be too young to even know.
No, I know what that is. Yeah.
What is that? What is that?
It's a game show.
He just says, "What is that?" Just so you could know that what you're referring to as too young.
Getting made fun of
game show
from now on, Daniel.
Yeah, it was a game show with 3 celebrity judges and then 3 kind of contestants, and they all proclaimed to be the same important person, like important but not really well-known person.
Oh, I think I might have seen that.
Yeah,
you have to at the end. You have to figure out who's who, right?
Well, yeah, and you're supposed to vote. So the celebrity contestants vote based on the answers that the contestants have given, and so we weren't allowed to watch a lot of TV in our family. So the fact that my mom was sitting us down in front of the TV, it's like, we're going to watch Dad on TV. And then my father on TV. And you have to understand, my dad was like this kind of geeky, cool, sometimes a little awkward, kind of shy guy. And it's like, I was just, what is Dad doing on TV? Cooking on TV and Oscars on TV. And
that's not where Dad is supposed to be.
Right. And especially when they introduced who Robert Moog was, and at that point nobody knew who the real Robert Moog was. But then at the end of the show, they say, "Will the real Robert Moog please stand up?" And he got none of the votes. He got none of votes. See the guy in the middle. I think the guy in the middle got all the votes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when they said, "Will the real Robert Moog please stand up?" and my dad like pops up with this huge grin on his face.
I'm happy that
look at that. It's amazing.
I'm happy that you're saying your last name a lot because it confirms that's how it's supposed to be said. Yeah. So everybody just know it's Moog.
Yeah, just look at the O's and you know it's Moogs.
Yeah.
No cows is what I like to say. Please, no cows.
No cows. Well, I could have sworn I've seen footage of Dr. Bob Moog saying some people in my family pronounce it Moog, some people in my family pronounce it Moog, so whatever.
Well, that's true, and that is on YouTube. It's like Moog on Moog, or that's what the video clip is called. It's something like that. And it's true that people pronounce that name differently. But the fact is, he pronounced his last name Moog.
Well, there you go, then.
And,
That's it.
You heard it here, folks.
Like, if Bob Moog is saying it's Moog, then we're gonna.
Then that's what we're gonna say.
Right.
And plus, I've been correcting people since I was in kindergarten. They called the roll, so I'm sticking to the party line here. And exactly what he explains in there is it's a Dutch name, and in Dutch it's pronounced Moch.
Oh.
So
now we got a third pronunciation.
Well, we're not asking everyone to do that guttural thing. We're just asking for long nose.
I actually
correct
would
people.
enjoy.
Actually, it's.
I would actually enjoy saying Moch because I would just walk up and just feel more.
That's what you fancy. That's what you fancy.
Well, yeah.
You can correct them like you're like actually.
And you can tell somebody you're such a noob. You don't even know.
You're such a noob. You kidding me? We actually have a relationship with Michelle Moog.
You're such a noob. Hey Bryce, it's not noob, it's noob.
Okay, right.
We're gonna start a movement now. We're gonna start.
There you go.
Yeah.
So Michelle, we were talking before the show began, and there was some interesting stuff. You were saying that you all just painted, just had to board up the Moog Foundation and stuff because of the stuff that's going on around us. and you're gonna be painting some stuff. You probably can't tell us what you're gonna, because this is gonna be like a reveal with what you painted up on the boards, or what's going on with that.
Yeah, so some of you guys might know that the Bob Moog Foundation, one of our main projects is the Moogseum, which just opened a year ago. We've been working for like 10 years to get something open. And of course, we had to close in the middle of March. But due to the protests in Nashville that have gotten, just a little agitated, they have gotten a little agitated, and there's been some breaking of windows and some tagging of windows. We decided to board up our windows along with many other storefronts in Nashville. And a lot of people were able to get theirs like painted right away with these really, if you just kind of look on Facebook, you'll probably be able to see all kinds of really cool tributes to George Floyd and say their name, Black Lives Matter, the power. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And but I had to sit there and kind of decide, what are we going to do? And I didn't want to be redundant to what other people had done, as beautiful as it was. And I certainly didn't want to just do like something that was just branding, I wanted to contribute something meaningful. And I started thinking about my dad, because he was really committed to civil rights of all kinds, equality of all kinds. As a matter of fact, he was a member of the ACLU for decades, and he used to proudly have a sticker on his briefcase that had all his tools in it that said card-carrying member of the ACLU.
Nice.
And he just really did not understand people who did not believe in justice, who didn't believe in equality, who didn't believe in equal opportunity. I think his ethos was so different. He was really frustrated by it. And so I just came up with a few phrases, basically thinking about him and the way that he approached his life and the world and his career, because it seems to me that his career is a real reflection of his commitment to, shining your gifts on everybody and making those gifts accessible to everybody. Yeah. And that's certainly what he did in his life.
Dope.
Yeah,
I love that.
Nice.
And I think I'm looking forward to seeing it too. And I think even in these times, it's cool to be able to have that legacy that has carried on from all of that time all the way up to now. And it's still his thoughts and his passions about all of that still very relevant today. So that's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They are. And I just think because he was really humble and really grounded, and he was a humanist, and that never gets old.
Yeah, no doubt.
He had a certain kind of special wisdom. So that definitely comes through in his thoughts. And, I feel like it also comes through in his instruments. When you say you were looking and looking and looking for that sound, and you finally got it. And sometimes I still find it stunning with all the leaps and bounds and technological advances that Moog sound still cuts through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there was times when I thought I'd found the sound, and I was like, I'm rocking with this, I'm rolling with this. But when I really got a Moog, I was like, that wasn't the damn sound.
Yeah, I rarely have to do any subtractive EQ or anything to my Moogs, like whenever I'm mixing a record, because they just fit really nice in the mix. So yeah, they have that. They definitely have that magical sound.
Very warm sound.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you say, you kind of met, the Bob Moog, there towards, you were already however old, and you knew him as Dad. This is Dad. That's his work, is what he does.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you started meeting people that were, had influence or that were famous, that his inventions and innovations kind of affected them the same way or impacted them the same way?
Yeah, there was just Dad, but all of a sudden he'd have Isao Tomita would come over to the house when he was visiting.
What?
Or I don't know if you guys know the jazz saxophonist Eddie Harris.
Yes.
Eddie Harris was at our house, and I loved him.
Wow, that's crazy.
Great, but but why did I love him? Because he was funny and smart and warm. I didn't know that he was a brilliant musician. But I tell you, the one time that it probably struck me the most, or maybe two, was when I was a little older. You begin to understand the nuances of these things. We lived way out in the country in North Carolina here. And, we had our driveway was a third of a mile long. We lived on 89 acres. There was nobody around. And one day, this guy comes in like tight black leather pants and a black leather jacket and long hair. And it's like, what is going on? It's like, oh yeah, that's one of the roadies from Toto. He's here to get a keyboard from me.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. You're like, what?
And it's like, wow, that guy's really, this. And that's when you begin to realize, like, you have this mind meld of, there is something else really big out there that I don't really understand, but it's right in front of me right now. And then Chick Corea came to visit once too. And Chick just has a very, even as a kid, or a teenager, I could sense he has a very special air about him. As I think
he's magical. He's magical.
He's magical. He's really deep. And I just sat there and stared at him the whole time. And it's not just trying to understand him, but then trying to understand my father through him. Wow. So it's when these people would appear who are very different from anyone else that we would ever see in our lives. I began to understand the kind of people that my dad was working with.
Yeah.
That's
so let's talk. That is actually super cool, and I kind of think the lineage of Moog music and Bob Moog and his inventions. So, what was it? The '60s when he created the first Moog synth, and then up through the '70s he was kind of thriving through things. At some point he closed business down. What was the advent that sort of thing happened, and how do you end up circling back around and come back?
That's a big old history right there.
Yeah.
I'll try to kind of
condense it.
Yeah. He met Herb Deutsch, who was the kind of catalyst for him inventing the Moog synthesizer. He met Herb at the end of 1963, invented the synthesizer in 64. Herb was sent the prototype in 1965. He developed his line of modulars in 66, 67. 67 is when they actually started calling them synthesizers. Before that, they were called portable electronic music composition systems.
That's too long.
It just rolls off the tongue.
That's too long.
So 1967 was the first time they referred to them as synthesizers.
Wow.
By 1967, the Moog synthesizer becomes integrated into pop music with the Byrds, the Monkees. 1968 is Swiss Jean Bach. In 1969, the Beatles used the Moog synthesizer on Abbey Road. Wow. So that was really
there was a time there too when it was almost a trend for record companies to be like, "Yo, Swiss Jean Bach did XYZ. We need us a Moog record. Everybody make a Moog record." Right?
They call them Moogsploitation albums.
Yeah, there you go.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's pretty
so
cool.
there are a lot of them out there. But then, at that point, the company and Dad began to realize they needed something that was portable. Those modulars were too expensive. They went out of tune too much. They were too hard to carry or impossible to carry. So that's when the idea of the Mini Moog came up through the company, started by an engineer named Bill Hemstad. And my dad really resisted the Mini Moog for a long time.
Really?
And one of the reasons is because he had devoted those 6 years and thousands of hours of his time to expanding the sonic landscape. And then the Mini Moog,
see that. Yeah.
The Mini Moog minimized that. But in its way, it expanded things in another way, and that is it put synthesis in the hands of a lot more people. It made it that much more accessible, exponentially more accessible. So that was 1970. But what also happened during that time, and this is a whole nother history, is that because of several factors, my dad was $250,000 in debt. So this is right when the Mini Moog was coming out, but before it had really exploded. And he needed to find an investor to get him out of his financial trouble, because $250,000 may not sound like a lot.
No, yeah.
Now,
$1 million.
today's money, it's $1.5 million.
Yeah.
You know, he's $1.5 million in debt. He's got 4 kids at home. And one of them's a newborn. So he had a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. In any case, he finally found someone to buy the business. And that person was a venture capitalist. And as far as his approach to the world and doing good, it was the complete opposite of my dad's. But he did save the business, and he wanted moving the business to Buffalo, New York. The name changed from R.A. Moog Co. to Moog Music at that time.
Okay.
And my dad stayed there from 1971 to 1977, but he got out of there as quickly as he could. He was the president of the company, but he was really, for a couple of years, he worked on some substantial synthesizer projects, but he was pretty quickly pushed to the side. And he was, by the end, he was building lab amps and Maestro foot pedals. So when he is asked about it in interviews, he diplomatically says, "I left Moog Music because they no longer knew how to use my talents."
So what was the last Robert Moog synth? The very last.
The last one is the Voyager.
Okay.
Yeah. And yet that is all him. I mean, he had help from some very important engineers that worked at the company, but that Voyager was his baby.
Wow. And that's you have the Voyager, right, Corey?
Yep, I do.
Oh, okay.
What?
So just I'll speed it up a little here, but in 1977, he left Moog Music, and that's when we moved down here. I was 10 years old. He lost the right to use his own name.
That's what I wanted to get to, like how that ended up happening. I guess I'll let you go for it. Yeah, they
when he left the company, he kind of sold his shares, and that was their way. I mean, I get it. That was their way of having kind of a compete clause. It would be hard for them to sell Moog instruments if there were also Bob Moog instruments out there. So he lost the right to use his name, and he started a company called Big Briar Incorporated. But it was very different. At that point, he felt like synthesis had gone as far as he was interested in it going. Where he felt it was really lacking was how musicians were able to interface with that synthesis. And he was really interested in alternative interfaces. And I'm not telling you what, this is 1979. The Hawken Continuum, the Rolly keyboards, all the other stuff that's coming out now, that is the kind of thing he was working on in 1979, even before.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, of course, he wasn't nearly as far along because his conceptualization of what that should be, the technology just wasn't there yet. And it also, those things depend on software, and he wasn't a coder. But when he passed away, right before he passed away, he was in search of a software engineer to help him bring one of his ideas to life. But anyhow, he had Big Briar for six years down here in North Carolina. And he was making these alternative interfaces, a theremin interface, a multi-touch sensitive interface, a touch plate interface, which finally wound up as a touch plate on the Voyager.
Wow.
He developed that way before, in the early 80s when I was a teenager. And I tell people every time I see one of those touch plates, I get this little my little brain goes like this, because for me, I mean, those touch plates are great, touch pads, but I remember coming home from school and opening the door to the house, and it stunk like chemicals. What is going on in here? My mom said your father is cooking touch plate panels in the oven.
Yo, that's mad funny. Like, hey, what's Dad making? Touch plate panels.
Touch plate.
Right. not chocolate chip cookies today.
Right.
Can we eat that?
No, sleep for dinner. We're making touch plates today.
Anyhow. So
That's hilarious.
he was doing that kind of thing. He was also making custom instruments for people. He was writing for Keyboard Magazine at that point. He was doing a lot of consulting and public speaking, but none of that.
What year was this? Just out of curiosity.
This is between 1978 and 1984.
Okay.
Okay. So these custom instruments that he was making for people, what are those?
Well, like one of them was a multi-touch sensitive keyboard. That is, I would say, a precursor to something like the Haken Continuum, the Rolly keyboards. It was developed for a microtonal opera composer, John Eaton.
Where's he at now? Is he still around? And
unfortunately, John passed away years ago. But you can read about him, and if you write his name down, John Eaton, and you search John Eaton Moog, there are some really fascinating interviews with him. He was he was a genius. He was a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient.
Wow. Okay.
Really, like, understated, beautiful human being. He and my dad really loved each other. But my dad worked on his instrument for 25 years.
Was there what synth was attached to that touch plate interface?
What you mean, to the multi-touch sensitive keyboard?
Yeah, to the multi-touch sensitive keyboard. What was he using?
I think it had its own synth engine.
Oh, okay. So it's just an interface.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Wow, that's pretty interesting.
I wrote it. I'm gonna look. I want to research this more. It's really,
yeah. In any case, so he was kind of working on what you might consider those kind of odd projects during that period. But what happened is it wasn't enough to pay the bills. And remember those 4 kids he had in 1970? Well, all of them became college age and they needed to go through school. Yeah. So he wound up, one of the companies that he was consulting for was Kurzweil. And they offered him a job as a vice president for new product research. And so we, in the middle of my junior year of high school, we hightailed it up to Boston. And my dad took a job, and he was there for 5 years doing that, kind of running big.
After R.A. Moog? Is that after R.A.?
Well, it went R.A. Moog, and then when Bill Waitana took over the company, it became Moog Musonics, and then Moog Music, and then Dad left in 1977. He started Big Briar. Now, during this period, of course, he's working for Big Briar, he's working for Kurzweil. What's happening with Moog Music? Well, as late as 1982, the Memory Moog comes out. So they're still making keyboards after he left. Okay. But it was around, a little bit after 1985 that Moog Music started having some big problems. And, I think the Japanese synthesizer companies were just too much competition and hard to keep up with. And they wound up closing down pretty soon after that. I mean, they kind of morphed Moog Music into something called Moog Electronics and EJE Electronics, and then it basically just tapered out. So Dad worked there, worked at Kurzweil until about 1989, came back down to North Carolina, opened Big Briar up again, but it wasn't too long. Oh, and then he started making theremins again. And eventually there was an analog resurgence, and that's when he started making Moogerfogers in 1998. So Big Briar was a theremin and Moogerfoger company for a while, and then in 2002, what happened is the trademark, or the Moke trademark, came up for renewal, and no one realized it, and Dad didn't realize it, and someone else grabbed it, and it was this guy named Don Martin, I think was his last name, Martin. And he started making modulars and mini Moogs. And that got my dad's attention because mini Moogs were crap. And that really bothered him, to see something with his name on it and his legacy on it that was not great quality. Yeah, there's our man. Because if Bob Moog was about anything, it was great quality. And so
he looked so happy.
Yeah.
Well, that's his happy place right there.
Yeah.
Genuinely, you know, when you look at someone's picture and you know it's a real smile. Like that's a great photo.
Yeah, it's great.
So he in 2000, well, in like 1999, 2000, he sued to get his name back, and it took a lot of money and a lot of time, but he finally got it back right in 2002, and that's when they launched the Voyager.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, he had been working on the Voyager, but they were able
What
to
year
get
did he pass? What year did he pass? Just out of curiosity.
2005.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow, that's a hell of a legacy.
I know.
And so, did you? When did the Bob Moog Foundation come online? You know, when was the inception of Bob Moog Foundation?
Well, this will bring us back to what you asked me at the very beginning. I wouldn't, when you said, do people come up to you and tell you about your dad and how is that and all that? So I wouldn't say that any of us envisioned my dad as someone who wanted a foundation named after him. He was too humble, and his focus was on his work. But what happened is when he got sick in the late spring of 2005, he found out he had a brain tumor.
Wow.
And things progressively got worse over a 3-week period. And what happened is he wanted to keep in touch with 40 people around the world. So he asked my brother, who was most tech savvy among us, to figure out a way to do that so that he didn't have to call people, write people. He was going through enough already because he was going through chemo and radiation. And so my brother set up a page on the caringbridge.com, which is basically a site where for people who are critically and terminally ill to be able to communicate with large groups of people that they care about. And it has two functions. One is you can write out and tell people how you're doing. It's a journal. The other one is a guest book where people write in and say, we love you. We're thinking about you. They can offer a prayer. They can tell you, eat 2 cups of blueberries a day because that'll help shrink your tumor, whatever it is. And what happened is that the link to that page was sent out to those very special 40 people. And without realizing that it was supposed to be a discrete thing, one of those people posted the link on a synthesizer chat group.
Oh, wow.
And we got 1,000 hits in a day.
Wow.
And we all kind of freaked out because we were really trying to keep this quiet. I mean, it's hard enough for everyone in the family to deal with what's going on. It's such a weird slippery path, and you don't know what's happening and what the result is going to be.
Yeah.
But then to have that be splashed all over the newspapers is something we really wanted to avoid. So, my brother got really angry and put up a password, and then he wrote the 40 people again and said, here's the password, don't share it. My dad surprised us a couple days later and said, you know what, just take the password down, just let him come.
Wow.
Which really surprised us, but that was such a beautiful thing. And that was the beginning of July. In that 7 weeks before he died, there were 60,000 hits on that page.
Wow.
And even more than that, there were 4,000 people who wrote into the guest book, but I found they were essentially 4,000 testimonials about how Bob Moog had impacted, influenced, transformed people's lives, how he gave them their creative voice, how because of him they were a musician, how because of him they were an engineer, how they saw him speak once and they were really scared to approach him, and they waited in line forever and walked up to him and asked him a question about design, and he whipped a pen out of his pocket and drew them a diagram on their still have up on their studio wall. So what I would do is during the day, I had 2 little kids then. I would, take care of my kids. I would go help take care of Dad when I wasn't working. And then after I put my kids to bed, I would sit in front of that computer and read those testimonials. And I am telling you, that was my introduction to Bob Moog.
Wow.
That is when the walls that he had built up came crashing down, and it was almost blinding. The light, it was like the recognition, the dawning of recognition of, I knew my dad invented the Moog synthesizer. That's about all I knew. What I didn't realize is the profound and widespread impact that he had on people all over the world. And that was really the springboard for all of us. I mean, we all just kind of looked at each other with our mouths open. It's like, what is this? Wow. But whether you're new to it or not, you recognize what an incredibly powerful and beautiful thing it is. So it's like, you know what? We need to do something to carry this forward.
I'm so happy you did.
Yes.
And so that's when we created the Bob Moog Foundation. So that's the origin. And I'm telling you, I feel like all of you and people like you taught me who Bob Moog was. Yeah. And I've been able to take that and carry that forward to hopefully keep that legacy alive for people of all ages. So that was, and the impetus was really to bring the legacy forward to future generations, people who hadn't been able to experience it themselves. And that's when we created our educational program, Dr. Bob's SoundSchool, where we teach little kids, 7-year-olds, about science of sound. We've taught 15,000 kids in our area about the physics of sound. Yeah, I'm really, really proud of that project, and we're working really hard to expand it nationwide. You can scroll down there.
Hey, Michelle, just to clarify, all of these foundations and programs that you're running with these names, is this all separate from the current Moog company?
Yes, we're completely separate. So the Bob Moog Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. And
so when people are donating, they're donating directly to the causes as opposed to, a company who then is contributing money and that sort of thing. It's directly to the cause.
Yes, and I'm really glad that you asked, because it's a common misperception, and I completely understand why. That people think Moog is Moog, but Moog Music makes the incredible instruments. That is their path, and we are the organization that carries Bob's legacy forward through education and archive preservation. So thank you for asking. But when you make a donation, it goes right to the nonprofit and only to the nonprofit.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up just because I've seen, like, it does seem like in the industry there's a lot of misunderstandings there as far as how that sort of stuff is played out, but you have stayed on this path of education, and not just towards educating people about your father, but educating new people just about music and technology and engineering and everything else that comes with that, which has been really beautiful. One thing that I did see was your TED Talk, which was fantastic.
Yeah, that was dope. It was a really cool TED Talk.
Thank you.
That TED Talk, was that something that was difficult for you to prepare, or had you already been kind of sort of telling that story for a while, or how did that come about for you?
It had its share of difficulty, but you know what? I'll tell you how I feel like it came about. Recently, we had a synthesist, Michael Whalen, on our Momentum in Place events, and he talked a lot about his sound design process. He just came out with an album called Sacred Spaces, and he designed over 900 sounds for it. And he was talking about how that process for him. And he said, it wasn't like I sat down and thought of a song and thought, okay, I'm going to need to create that sound. I'm going to need to create that sound. He said, no, you know what? I just went to my instruments. I let them lead me. I created all these sounds. And then I sat down and thought, okay, I've got all these sounds. Now, okay, I'm going to start with this one. Okay, now I've got that one. Well, I feel like my TED Talk was that. It was the synthesis of everything that I had been feeling, experiencing, and learning in this position. So in that way, once I could sit down and focus on what my theme was, it came together fairly easy. If anything was difficult, is that I was running the foundation with one part-time person at that point. And so it was, I was really busy doing that. And I would have loved to spend a little bit more time preparing for my TED Talk, but I did make it through it without screwing up. So it
was good.
But
I learned a lot listening to it.
I'm telling you what, the wellspring for that TED Talk is Bob Moog.
Yeah.
Really just the power of inspiration, because it's just what we're talking about. The way that, you know, and it's not just how he inspired other people, which he did, and how he inspired me, how he continues to inspire me, but I knew how much other people had inspired him, how deeply inspired he was by the work of Leon Theremin, by the work of Wendy Carlos, by Clara Rockmore's incredible virtuosa talents, and by Herb Deutsch, by so many people. We are all, you know, beautifully driven by inspiration if we allow ourselves to be. And I saw that in him, you know, the full continuum of the people he was inspired by to the people he inspired. So that in that way it came together easily.
What else was Bob Moog good at that we don't know? Like, what's a fun fact?
That's a good question.
Fun fact, the thing with the
because a lot of creatives are great at one. We see them creative in one area, but they're really creative in a lot of other areas.
Yeah. So you know what? Bob Moog was a great cook and baker.
Wow.
And I just feel like, you know,
we got to do a Bob Moog restaurant.
You know what? That is just synthesis of another form.
Yes,
it is. It is.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, he would put the same kind of craftsmanship into that he did everything else. He was also a really good gardener. He loved to
That's what I was about to say. I had heard tales of his gardening as well. So I had heard that he had a beautiful garden.
He did, and he loved to garden. And in the Moog documentary, the one that's already out, you know, that came out in the early 2000s, he's in there saying, you know, he's gardening. They're filming him gardening, and he says, you know, there's a similarity between gardening and engineering. I don't know what it is, but I can just feel it. Yeah, he loved to garden. He was, you know, we heated our house with wood, and he often would chop almost all that wood, and he was very precise about that. He loved nature, so he was a real aficionado, you know, nature lover, understood the birds. He was a bird watcher. He had a really raucous sense of humor. And you know what? I actually have some jewelry that he made my mother that's quite beautiful.
Wow, that's amazing.
In the early 60s. I wish I had worn it, one of them. But he made it in the 60s. My mom would jokes around and said, that's what your father was doing when he was procrastinating from writing his thesis. He certainly, you know, he's known for the sonic beauty that he contributed to, but he really appreciated, you know, visual beauty in all forms as well.
I really love the fact that a lot of Bob Moog's inventions really unify a lot of people when it comes to like just the low end and the synthesis and just the vibe that comes off the instruments. You can get so many people from different walks of life and different races, different creeds, all this stuff to sit and say like, yo, that synth makes me feel a certain way. And I think that's the power of like a lot of innovative thinkers that create these things that just bring people together and create a sound and a message that we could all like get behind, you know. And that's something that's really beautiful about just thinking now into the future, like the legacy that he created that's going to inspire people like us to make things in the future, to really just unite people. So I'm just really excited about hearing these stories, because when we hear it, it kind of confirms the vibe that we get from the instrument.
Word.
It's like, oh man, that's the dude that made this vibe, this sound. It really means a lot. And so it's something's really special just hearing this stuff. So I'm really encouraged by it.
Well, good. And I think you're right. That sound is just a reflection of, you know, his, I don't know, his kind of connection to the earth. I know that may sound a little woo-woo, but, you know, his whole connection to his life in general was very grounded and open, and this connection to nature, and, you know, that big fat analog sound, I think is a mirror of all of that.
Here's the flip. Yeah, he was a great dude, but you lived in the house, so who did he have beef with?
I was gonna kind of touch on that.
Wait, didn't there was some things with ARP at one point, right?
It was a little bit of stuff with ARP, but in the end, they were friends. But yeah, well, that's because Alan, used the filter on a couple of things. That really upset Dad, and Dad went and gave him what for. But my understanding is, then Alan developed this very stable oscillator, and Dad learned a few things from that. So,
it becomes industry, pushing industry forward, pushing the individuals forward at that point.
Yeah, but that's special because they had beef, but then they learned from each other, and that's the point. That's the point. It's like, hey man, you took my sound. He's like, yeah, because you did it wrong. Let me show you how to fix it. This is how you do this.
Right.
So like
they bounce off of each other.
Yeah, we fight with each other all the time. Us in this group, we
shut up, Steele.
Because me and Ken, me and Flux are always fighting with each other all the time. But it's because I'm better than him.
So Michelle, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So Michelle, the final years of Bob's life and what you learned in those years, that relationship between you and your father, and synthesis. Can you talk about that a little bit? What was that like? Those final years and your relationship with your dad.
I didn't learn anything about synthesis in those final years. In those final years, it was, my dad was here in Nashville. I was here in Nashville. My parents had gotten divorced. He was married to somebody else. I would see him for lunch every other week. And he would come over and babysit my kids a few times. And, we'd have them over, we'd go over there. But, the thing that I really just learned and marveled at him is how wise he was, how present he was. When you were in front of him, he was really present. Mm-hmm. How when you asked him a question and you thought you knew how he was going to answer, a lot of times you didn't. Mm-hmm. And it almost to the point now when people say, well, Bob would have thought, it's like, honey, please. That is the special thing about Bob, is that we don't know what he would have thought. I mean, I've met a lot of people in my life, especially through this job, but he was really connected to the universe in a different way than most people. And, and he says in that same movie, that's it, only because he opened himself up to it. He opened himself up to the network of ideas and allowed those ideas to come through him. He said it would be egotistical of me to think those ideas were my own. Mm-hmm. I open myself up to the network of ideas and they come through me.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Right. And yet it's not the way people think about it. So there was a certain amount of, he was able to put aside that ego that we all do a dance with, and let something really special come through. And I learned a lot from that wisdom, that kind of cosmic intelligence. That's really what I was absorbing at that point.
That's cool, cosmic intelligence. That's
so with the Moog Foundation, being having a pretty vested interest in teaching people, can you dive in a little bit as far as what that means, and like kind of get to some specifics as far as what the program's actually doing?
Mm-hmm. Like the approach, I guess, with the kids.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we learned is how powerful sound and learning about shaping sound, exploring sound can be. And we wanted to carry that forward, but we really wanted to get in on the ground level. There are a lot of institutions that already teach synthesis to people who are, teenagers and young adults. We don't need to duplicate that. Not that many institutions are teaching little kids about the science of sound. And especially these days when, a kid can pick up the phone and start playing a synthesizer on it.
Yeah.
And know nothing about what comes, what the principles of where all that comes from. So we decided we were going to get in on the base level and inspire those kids, not only through sound, but to embrace the idea of discovery and curiosity. So Dr. Bob's Sound School is basically teaching kids about the basic physics of sound. They learn how sound is made, how it travels, and how it's heard. That's a 10-week curriculum. This is not the kind of thing we go into a school for an hour and do a presentation. This is 10 weeks. Kids use we set up all kinds of experiential experiments, activities for them. They use a theremin hooked up to an oscilloscope to understand pitch and volume. They learn how to read waveforms. I mean, we've got 15,000 little kids that run around Asheville that can tell you, they can read a waveform and tell you, is it a high pitch or low pitch, loud sound or a soft sound?
I applaud that.
I'm a little kid. I wanna go.
The biggest little kid.
That's so dope.
There's a bunch of grown dudes in the back. With notes.
Right.
Man, that's so amazing.
Hey, I'll report you.
Back there.
Hey, Bryce, I'll report you.
So, in addition to them learning the principles of sound, one of the things we do is we have them create a science notebook where they follow scientific methodology. We teach them about scientific methodology. That you have an idea, you write that idea down, you test the idea, and you write down the results. And the way that we set an example for them is we share Bob's notebook pages with them.
Oh, wow.
That's exactly what he did. All of it, and the notebook page I love the most is where he writes down his idea, he tests it, and then he writes down the results and puts a big X through it and says it didn't work. And then the next page is him trying again.
Yeah.
We teach kids, every idea you have is valid. And every time you test it out and it doesn't work, you're one step closer to it working. And the goal actually isn't only to get it working. The goal is that journey of discovery.
That reminds me of Edison. Like what was it? Like 10,000 different
tries.
Yeah, before he actually got the light bulb to work. So yeah, that
exactly. And I think in some ways kids aren't encouraged to do that kind of exploration. They sit in front of their video games, and it's a different kind of experience. I'm not going to bash video games. I know kids get certain things out of that, but this is a kind of counterbalance to those kind of experiences.
Yeah,
we're really excited about it because Dr. Bob Sound School works. The kids love it. The teachers love it. The administrators love it. And we've had parents come back to us and say, you know what, when I pick my little girl up every day, I ask her what she did in school. And she's like, I went to recess. She said, but you know what? This is one parent our first year teaching told me this. I saw her at a party in the summer. So it was right after that first school year. And she said, but I knew exactly when it was Dr. Bob's Sound School Day because my little girl would get in the car and she taught me about Leon Theremin and Clara Rockmore, talked to me about waveforms and vibrations going from your throat into the air back into someone else's ear. And I just sat there listening to this and I thought, I almost teared up because okay, this is working. This works. Yeah. If that little girl could explain it to her mom, well enough for her mom to repeat it back to me. So we're working on expanding this program nationwide, and of course things are really different right now. So we're putting the motions in place for when we can expand. We will be expanding, and we hope to inspire a generation of little kids through the science of sound. And it's a science curriculum taught through music and technology. So we're weaving all that together. You know, it's Bob Moog's legacy, all woven together and presented at a 7-year-old level. And we would like to create one for 5th and 6th grade, and then one for 7th and 8th grade as well, so that there's some kind of continuum that we can build upon.
Hey, based on some of the sounds I hear out here, you need something for like 20,000th grade.
20,000. No doubt.
What do you mean by that?
Older people
just
that are
not
adults
kids.
that are not making great music is what he's talking about.
Right.
Hey, Michelle, let's talk a little bit about how people can help the Bob Moog Foundation in general, just because it is a nonprofit organization. So how do you get your funding, and how can people help?
Yeah.
Well, Ken, thank you for asking, because it's a really important question. One of the things that is a challenge for us is one of the things that you asked about before, that people think we're part of the company Moog Music, which we're not. And we do not get any funding from Moog Music, and that's kind of a deliberate choice on our part. It's important for us to be independent, so that we can do our own thing, and they can do their own thing, and so there aren't any kind of false expectations in that dynamic. So we started off with almost no funding back in 2005, and we have slowly built this foundation from the ground up. For 5 years, it was me working alone in my basement, which is where I am now. Ironically enough.
That's a nice look. You got a nice looking basement.
You got walls?
Ken, show us your basement. Never mind.
So it's been a gradual process of building the foundation up with the help of a lot of people and a few different companies. So the most powerful way to help is to donate. And that may sound kind of trite, because of course you hear that all the time, but it's really true. It's like saying, well, what's the best way to get my car to run? Well, you need to put some gas in it. And if you don't, it's not going to run, even though it's a great car. Yeah. So that's when you can consider donations the fuel that makes this foundation run. So that's a really powerful way. Another powerful way is for all the tech geeks out there. There are a few companies that have supported us with some really beautiful products. Spectrasonics and Eric Persing were the first to do that. Spectrasonics developed the Bob Moog Tribute Library, which is a sound library that has, I think, over 800 sounds in it. With 40,
I got it. It's great.
42 different artists created sounds for it. And that was developed in 2011, and it's still, the funding from that is still an important part of what funds the Bob Moog Foundation.
Nice.
Motu also created something. So for anyone who uses their Mach 5 sampler, I think it is, that there's what is it called? The Bob Moog Foundation Encore Sound Bank. And then most recently, Native Instruments created modular icons, which also benefits the Bob Moog Foundation, something we were heavily involved in.
Nice.
So that's another way. Another way is that we have an online store with all kinds of cool T-shirts.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I bought those posters a while back when I had a different studio then, so I wanted some things put on the wall. So I got the waveform posters, the color.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, this is great.
Just so you know, the only reason this isn't on the wall right now, and you can see I have the other one in the back there.
Oh, yeah.
And I have, and the one right there. I don't know how to do this with my video flipped, but yeah, I've got the whole shebang here, and I love these, by the way. They're super awesome, and they glow in black light too, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I have to say, that's a really beautiful way that some people have participated. Those posters were designed by DN KG Studios out in LA, and they initially donated some of them for a poster art show that the earliest Moog Fests held, just to benefit the foundation. That's when AC Entertainment was running Moog Fest. And I went back to them and asked them if we could reprint them. And we wound up reprinting them, and they sold out so quickly and raised $10,000 for the foundation.
Wow, that's
just great.
Awesome.
That's great. So if you check out our online store, that's a really important way. I've been going to the Moogsseum and packing stuff because we had a very active May, and a lot of people were visiting our website and visiting the stores, and all of that helps. Every little bit helps. There are also other ways you can choose us as your beneficiary of choice on Amazon Smile. If you order stuff from Amazon, you just go through. If you go through Amazon Smile, choose us as your beneficiary. A little bit of every purchase you make comes to us. It doesn't cost you anything. Yeah, we've got a little bit of music up on Bandcamp. There's an Edgar Froese tribute album that several musicians made that also benefits us.
Nice.
So there's a page, Corey, if you can find it. There's a page on our website called all of the cool ways you can support the Bob Moog Foundation.
Oh, yeah, I'm on here right now. Hold on 1 second.
And it has all of these ways, and probably some that I've forgotten, listed there. But, even if it's something like, what's really powerful is if you make a monthly donation, and even if it's $10, it all adds up. And those kind of donors who can donate every month really helps us. People can donate items to our archive. Yeah, someone donated a Sonic 6 to us last year. They donated a Micro Moog. Yeah, the Micro Moog is being restored right now. We're going to put it in our store at the Moogseum and let people play it.
Wow.
Yeah, and people have donated old articles, letters from Bob, all kinds of schematics, Moog memorabilia. Someone is sending us a Moog jacket that they got when they were earlier in their career, and Bob signed the inside of it for them.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. So there are all kinds of ways that people can help, and if people have any questions about if they have a special way they think they can help, they can always contact us at info@moogfoundation.org, and we'll get back to them.
That's great.
Nice.
I have a final question before we wrap up. Any secret synths you have in the house that no one's ever been able to see? You just confirm, just say yeah or no. You don't got to tell us what it is, but
no, and no. Okay. That's the thing. I was never close to that part of the legacy. If anyone has the secret synths, it's Moog music.
Okay, because I'm like, man, it might be something in the attic or under the bed, behind the fridge. There might be like
the secret would be
in the basement there.
No.
By telling us.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, man, what did you see in your house that you might have forgotten? Like, wait, that thing was in our living room, or that thing was like whoa.
And tell us before that we were. I remember years ago I talked to Wave Shaper, the guys over there. I actually interviewed them. I was at Moog Fest, and they were premiering. Was it All of the Wires or
I Dream of Wires?
I Dream of Wires. They were premiering I Dream of Wires at Moog Fest, and I got a chance to interview them, and I hung out with everybody. That was a great event that year. Then I was actually happy to hear that they were working with you on a Bob Moog documentary, and Electronic Voyager is the name. How's that coming about now?
It's going really well. I mean, it's slow, but I actually think there's some beauty behind that because they're not rushing it, and they're really determined to deliver a really meaningful and deep and unknown story. So that's all taken a little bit of time, and they're just like a lot of documentary organizations, they struggle for funding, and they have invested a lot of money in this. I have traveled all up and down the East Coast with them. I went out to California with them. We went to Europe and interviewed Peter Zanavia. Lydia Kavina, who is Leon Theremin's the daughter of his cousin. But she was Leon Theremin's student. We interviewed Jean-Michel Jarre. We interviewed Felix Visser, who used to have Synton synthesizers and was very close to my father. I mean, we are interviewing people who have not been interviewed before, and we're getting lots of people together to be interviewed at once. Like the original engineers of Moog Music all got together in Trumansburg, New York, at the old RA Moog Co. and talked about those days. So they. Actually, at this point, the guys have a 2-hour rough cut. They've got a 4-hour rough cut. They've got something else that they're working on that will help fund getting those 2 cuts, the 2-hour and 4-hour cut, out to the public. They were down here last September. We filmed a bunch of B-roll. We did a couple more interviews, and I did a big long voiceover. But some of that voiceover has changed, so I'm going to be doing another voiceover. So we're still working on it, but it's very deliberate and detailed work, and they're trying to dig up all kinds of cool photos that people haven't seen before, old information. So it's a kind of thing where you're going to say, well, that was worth the wait. And I know a lot of people have been frustrated. It's like, where is it? It's like, it's coming. It is coming. They are working on it. And they have really been wonderful stewards of this story.
That's great.
How is that going to be released? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know yet, and I don't think they know yet. They've got a little while to go. They got to raise the funding. It's really the music licensing at this point that I think is the big consideration for them. So they may have to. Yeah, that's about all I can say. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to roll out. Right. Yeah, I Dream of Wires made it onto Netflix. Perhaps something like that will be an avenue. Cool. I know at some point when these things become possible again, they want to premiere it at one of the big film festivals, like Hot Docs or South by Southwest, and there are many others that they're looking at. So I am really excited because we went back and talked to someone who knew him as a little boy. His Mark Kupferberg's father hired my dad when my dad was a teenager to work in his power supply company. Wow. My dad was designing the power supplies for them when he was in college, and he remembers him. And so nice. It's all these kind of unique perspectives that we've been able to get, and really some really stunning moments.
I can tell you, but having met those guys and seeing and knowing their passion for the work that they do, the guys at Wave Shaper, I don't think you could have chose a better team to partner with for something this important. And I think it's going to have a lot of impact. And those just nice guys. And, I know that, just from what I found out from interviewing them and from the fact that they had, I Dream of Wires, and then they had kind of like the hardcore cut where it was like twice as long almost, and it was still just as interesting. Like, this is going to be really good stuff. So I believe it'll be worth the wait.
There you go.
Yeah, it will. And they've been really great to work with, and they are really passionate. They're both electronic musicians and really into electronic music, of course, and have this huge reverence for Bob and for the whole spectrum, of inventors. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about it. And one of the beautiful things that happened recently is they sent me a 2-hour rough cut, and I watched it, and there was so much great stuff. But I said to them, I'm not going to say specifically what it was, but I said to them, you know what? There's just one important part that's not being addressed. And they were like, yeah, we actually realized that. What can we do? How can we do this? So we're working together to try and figure out how to weave that important aspect into the story. So they're open, and they really have a lot of intention and integrity going into this project.
That's awesome.
Right. I love that. Mm-hmm. Well, cool. I want to say before we go into it, we're a little bit over an hour, but when in the 90s, I was doing a lot of rap shows, and I was in a hip hop group in Chicago, and I decided at some point, like, yo, bro, we broke. And we sharing a vegetarian Subway sandwich, and I think I need to
that already sounds horrible.
Yeah, it was bad.
Vegetarian, no meat.
Yeah,
Man. So I'm sorry, Corey.
Yeah, it was bad news, man. And our manager, in the 90s, it was a style where some cats would rock 2 pair of socks and extra shirts, have a t-shirt, a regular shirt, and then another shirt on top of that. And it was a very hip hop sort of look. And I'm like, this dude got 1 million new shirts on, and we sharing a sandwich over here.
with mad shirts, sweaty.
Yeah, and he got new boots on, and it's cold in Chicago. Anyway, that was the time that I made a decision. Like, I ain't about to be no broke musician, broke artist kind of thing. So I decided I was going to go and study electronics. And when I was studying electronics, I really discovered Bob Moog because we had to do a senior project for my associate's degree in electronics. And I chose to build a theremin. And yeah,
a man after my father's heart.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I never built that theremin at that point because somebody said, well, you can volunteer at this school building computers and get the credit and you don't have to think. I was like, okay, I'll go do that. But years later, as I was studying for my master's degree, and that's when B-Boy Tech Report came about. It was actually a project for my master's degree. And I told a story about how I was supposed to build a theremin and never did. And then somebody from Moog Music reached out to me. It was like, you know what? We love your blog. We love what you do. We love this kind of technical and hip hop and music sort of thing that you're bringing together in the blog. So we're going to send you a free theremin. And they sent that theremin to me. Then they bought ads from the site for me, and I built the theremin. I felt proud. I was standing there like, I finally built my theremin.
That's great.
Yo, like, it feels cool to have you on the show and just kind of talk about your father's legacy. And I love the work that you do. I just want to thank you for coming on.
Yo, the only reason I ain't mess with theremin because it seemed like a workout.
No, that's not the only reason. It's because you're way too young. Be still. Just be real.
Nah, dog.
Yeah.
Listen,
bro.
nah.
Come on now.
The thought of making music like this and working out and working into a sweat just totally was not attractive.
It's so cool. Like I had a chance.
Says the drummer.
And it's
right. Exactly.
Exactly.
I have to say too. Like I had an opportunity to for the first time to play the Moog synthesizer 12, like an original.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I looked in the back of that and I was like, this thing is as old as I am. And it's amazing. It's like, wow.
My daughter will still come into my studio here sometimes. Like I was messing with modular. She'll say, you know what this needs? It needs the theremin. That's what she needs. It needs.
That's really cool.
But yeah, it was an amazing experience.
No doubt.
Yeah,
but it was amazing talking to you, Michelle.
Oh well, thank you. It's so fun being on. Thank you.
Yeah,
I would just say 2 things to wind up. First of all, we're sitting here talking about the theremin. Everyone should remember that Bob Moog would not be who he was without Leon Theremin.
Mm-hmm.
He was so deeply inspired by another very humble, dedicated, and brilliant innovator. And he knew he stood on Leon Theremin's shoulders and on others like Leon Theremin. Wow. And Leon Theremin has a big presence in the Moogsseum. But the other thing, and as we're wrapping up in the times we're living in, I just want to say, and I feel like Bob Moog would say the same thing. And first of all, is that Black Lives Matter. And second of all, is that all those people out there protesting better be voting.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Love to hear that.
Ultimate voice.
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, we appreciate you, and you're always welcome on if you ever have something that's new happening. As a matter of fact, when the documentary comes out, we'd love to have you back and talk about your journey and have the other guys from Wave Shaper on with you. That would be a really, really good conversation.
That would be amazing.
No doubt. Well, without further ado, listen, we want to thank Michelle for coming by and talking with.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And we hope we'll be able to see you in person again at NAMM if these quarantines and isolations
Right.
ever left.
Right.
Man, they gonna let that
Fingers
many people
crossed.
into one room
I
again.
definitely look forward to meeting you in person.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That'd be
Yeah.
great. Whenever that can happen, I look
Yeah, I
forward to
know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for all of those people that's out there checking this out, whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it after it airs, smash that like button, smash the subscribe button, like, share, subscribe, and support these efforts so we can keep bringing you dope content.
Hey, Corey.
Yes.
Corey.
Yeah.
I just want to say, you don't have to smash it. Just hit it lightly so that you can do it again next week.
Smash
Like,
it.
No,
smash
break it.
I don't want you to break it.
Smash
Break
that
it
like.
down.
Just
it.
keep it in good working condition so that you can do it
The way
often.
you like and subscribe. All right, thanks, guys. We're going to end the show right there.
Yeah. Yo, that was amazing.